It is the 41st millennium, and the Fourth Tyrannic War is raging across the galaxy. A storm of chitin and flesh sweeping over world after world. Somewhere in the vast reaches of the segmenting Pacificus, a fleet of loyalist defenders made their stand against the oncoming HIVE fleet. The battle had been planned with precision, every tactic calculated to break the swarm's relentless advance. Yet as with all things in war, reality had torn those plans asunder. Everything happened so quickly. The Tyranid Bio-ships were suddenly everywhere, and the battle was definitely not going to plan.
They died well.
What had started as a calculated trap, laid to crush the approaching Xenos threat before it could spread further, quickly devolved into a slaughter.
Our brothers have fallen.
The swarming bio-ships moved like predators in a feeding frenzy, weaving through the Imperial line of battleships, splitting it apart with an almost instinctual precision. Then they were inside. Thousands of them. Gaunts, Ripper swarms, gene stealers, and abominations beyond naming. Each one a living weapon bred for slaughter. They poured into the ships like torrents of death, surging through every breach and vent, spreading through the Imperial fleet like a vile infestation. The Imperial forces fought valiant, holding choke points and barricading passageways, but ultimately it was a losing battle. Orders barked across Fox channels became drowned out by the hiss of static and the agonized screams of those dying within their shattered vessels.
Emperor's light, no!
The astropath is convulsing! We can't get a hymnal to Terra!
Blessed Emperor, get us out of here, all speed! They must be warned. Someone must!
He gripped his lasgun tight, his heart pounding as he fought the primal urge to run. The air was thick and oppressive. Every breath felt like a struggle as Sergeant Varyn stumbled through the dim, fleshy corridors. His boots squelched against the pulsing floor, slick with some unnameable secretion. The walls shifted around him. No, they breathed. A steady, rhythmic pulse, like the inhaling and exhaling of a colossal beast. At first he had thought the ship had been breached, that they were aboard a wrecked vessel, adrift in the void. But as the walls quivered and contracted, like muscles clenching in the body of a leviathan, the horrifying realization dawned upon him. They hadn't survived. He and the crew had been swallowed whole by a Tyranid Bio-ship. They were in the pit of its stomach. He understood. Varyn wondered for a moment if he'd survive, yet he knew there was nowhere to go. They were inside the beast, and the beast was alive. The Tyranids are a species entirely defined by their biology, a nightmarish mix of flesh, bone, and chitin that adapts and evolves at an impossible pace. Each Tyranid organism, from the smallest drone to the largest bio-titan, is engineered for a specific purpose within the swarm. At the heart of this nightmare are the Tyranid Bio-ships, the colossal living vessels that carry the swarm across the stars. A bio-ship's hull pulses with unnatural life, its skin-like surface toughened into thick, chitinous plates that can withstand the rigors of interstellar travel and the fury of battle. In this episode, we will delve deep into the nightmarish reality of the Tyranid Bio-ships, those colossal living vessels that stalk the void like predators in the dark. These are not mere ships. These are beasts, organic horrors that serve as both the home and weapon of the Tyranid swarm. We will venture beyond their chitinous exteriors and explore the labyrinthine depths within, where the laws of biology and war are twisted into something utterly alien. What secrets and monstrosities lurk inside their pulsating corridors? What horrors await those unfortunate enough to be swallowed by these creatures of the Hive Fleet? The mere sight of a Tyranid Bio-ship emerging from the void is enough to freeze the blood of even the most seasoned warriors of the Imperium. These living horrors herald destruction on a scale that few can fathom. Wherever these colossal creatures drift, they leave behind barren husks of planets, their once thriving ecosystems dissolved and devoured by the insatiable hunger of the Hive Fleet. Entire civilizations are devoured, consumed, reduced to nothing more than sustenance for the relentless advance of the swarm. Each Hive Fleet is a nightmarish armada of bio-ships, grotesque, space-borne organisms, as diverse as they are deadly. At their core are the Hive ships, towering nerve centers of the Tyranid swarm, capable of spawning legions of organisms tailored to conquer new worlds. These hideous behemoths, bristling with pulsating cerebral nodes, project the shadow in the warp, with a ferocity that bends reality itself. Their weapons defy comprehension. Warp blasts that obliterate ships in an instant, or even more horrifying, the ability to twist the minds of their enemies, plunging crews into a nightmare of hallucinations, paranoia, and soul-crushing fear. And these hive ships rarely hunt alone. These behemoths are surrounded by smaller void beasts that fiercely defend them. The hull of a Tyranid Bio-ship is a grotesque marvel of Xenos biology. A thick, pulsating layer of chitinous plates interwoven with sinewy tendrils and bioorganic matter. Unlike the cold, lifeless metal of Imperial starships, the Bio-ship's exterior is a living, breathing entity, constantly shifting and pulsating with unnatural life. The chitinous armor plates that form the ship's outer shell are as hard as ceramite, yet flexible, allowing the bio-ship to withstand the stresses of space travel and the fury of battle. These plates are not merely static defense. They grow, regenerate, and evolve, adapting to new threats as the hive mind deems necessary. Beneath this armored carapace, layers of fibrous tissue and vascular channels circulate nutrients and biofluids, ensuring the ship remains in a constant state of repair and readiness, able to seal breaches and regenerate damage with terrifying efficiency. The forms of Tyranid hive ships vary widely, from colossal battering rams that shatter orbital stations to winged monstrosities that cast entire worlds into darkness. Razor-beaked predators hunt enemy vessels with ruthless efficiency, while bloated carriers release swarms of winged horrors and clouds of living minds. unleashing volleys of bioplasma and storms of razor-sharp thorns that tear through the toughest of armors. Yet as fearsome as the exterior of a Tyranid Bio-ship may be, it is but the outer shell of a far more insidious horror. Beyond the armor and the unsightly weaponry lies a labyrinthine interior, a living nightmare where every surface pulses with life. To truly understand the terror of these vessels, one must venture inside, into the dark, pulsing heart of the Hive fleet. The interior of a Tyranid Bio-ship is a realm of pure nightmare, a labyrinth of living flesh and pulsating walls that seem to breathe with a life of their own. Gone are the cold, metallic corridors of conventional starships. Here, every surface is slick and organic, covered in a mucus-like secretion that glistens under the dim, bioluminescent glow emanating from clusters of nerd nodules embedded within the ship's skin. The air is thick and humid, stifling with the stench of decay and an acrid tang of alien chemicals, as if the ship itself was exhaling foul breath with every movement. Walls ripple and shift, as if they are muscles contracting beneath a thin layer of hide, reacting to the presence of any intruders. Small and fragile organisms can often be crushed to death solely by the sheer force of the contracting muscles of the giant ship. Veins, thick as a man's arm, snake along the ceiling, throbbing rhythmically as biofluids course through them, feeding the ship's ever-hungry organs. Some passages are narrow, suffocatingly so, while others open into vast chambers filled with pulsating sacs, writhing tentacles, and clusters of quivering flesh that ooze and gurgle with alien life. Further within, the temperature rises, and the surroundings grow more alien, more hostile. Fleshy tubes descend from the ceilings, dripping with strange fluids, while differently shaped openings convulse in the walls, ready to swallow any who dare approach. The ship seems to be listening, sensing every movement with an uncanny awareness. The chambers deep inside the ship hold the true horrors. Here lie the birthing pools and digestion pits, vast cauldrons of biomatter where captured prey and all absorbed matter is broken down into nutrients, and new Tyranid organisms are spawned. The air is filled with the wet, sucking sounds of bioconstructs being molded into existence, their forms silhouetted by the sickly light of glowing sacs. To venture into these depths is to witness the ship's unholy purpose. A factory of war, endlessly creating and consuming, driven by the insatiable hunger of the hive mind. These giant organisms are often referred to as the Norn Queens. These are the supreme bio-architects of the Tyranid Hive fleets. The master organisms responsible for the creation and genetic evolution of every Tyranid creature. Deep within the heart of the largest bioships, these monstrous entities lie ensconced in vast organic chambers. They possess immense psychic power, linking them directly to the hive mind, which allows them to direct the endless cycle of creation and adaptation. With each battle, they absorb genetic material from the consumed biomass, refining their designs and spawning new horrors perfectly adapted to face their next prey. The Norn Queen's will is absolute. They weave the very essence of the swarm, spawning countless bioforms from the smallest ripper to the towering biotitans. It is for this reason that these rare organisms are heavily protected with some of the most vile traps the Tyranid race has at their disposal. The interior of a Tyranid Bio-ship is a death trap. A living gauntlet designed to repel intruders. As soon as an invader or a strange object is detected, the ship responds with an array of organic defenses, turning its dark corridors into killing fields. Thick tentacles sprout from the walls, whipping out with lightning speed to ensnare any trespassers. These appendages, covered in razor-sharp barbs and coated with acidic slime. They constrict and crush with bone-breaking force, dragging prey towards gaping maws embedded into the walls, where they are devoured. Any cries for help or pleas for mercy are futile by this point, as the ship is only doing its job of instinctively protecting itself. The ship can also weaponize its own fluids, flooding corridors with streams of acid, or spitting jets of corrosive enzymes that can melt through armor in seconds. In some areas, sphincter-like vents open to release clouds of toxic spores that choke the air, burning the lungs of any who breathe them. The ship's interior can swiftly alter its own layout, sealing off passageways with fleshy membranes, or dropping organic barriers to trap invaders in small, confined spaces. As the ship's defenses grow more desperate, it unleashes its internal guardians, swarms of rippers. Ravenous, flesh-eating creatures pour from orifices in the walls, scuttling over floors and ceilings to devour anything in their path. Various other bioorganisms can emerge from incubation chambers hidden within the ship's body, rushing forth to hunt the intruders and protect the Norn Queens and other important organs inside the ship. Every defense mechanism is a part of the ship's living ecosystem, an extension of the hive mind's will to consume and assimilate, transforming the bio-ship into a living fortress where death waits around every corner. For this reason, only the bravest and most well-equipped assault units would ever attempt to board one of these deadly living ships. And even then, only under circumstances of a last resort. Boarding assaults on Tyranid bio-ships are some of the most dangerous missions any warrior can undertake. Even supposedly dead vessels have proven lethal to those who boarded them without caution. The hyper-adaptive physiology of the Tyranids means that identifying a relatively safe point for a boarding craft to strike is incredibly difficult. Areas that prove ripe targets for assault on one gargantuan void beast may be indistinguishable from those on another craft, or it could turn out to be an acid sack or a Moloch spawning chamber. Reports from boarders who have survived to recount their experiences speak of vicious, foul conditions. There have been encounters with pulsating encephalic matter, creeping tentacles with black orbs for eyes, nests of needle-like teeth, and chambers filled with filter-choking spores and toxic miasmas. Furthermore, survivors tell of bizarre gravity and sonic effects, as well as clouds of biostatic that renders scanning, navigational, and targeting equipment all but useless. Returned picked footage reveals palpitating tubules glistening with alien matter, throbbing translucent sacs and nests of barbed lashes throughout a bio-ship's gruesome innards. The very worst thing, or so the survivors say, is that the bio-ship itself knows its insides have been invaded, and reacts like any other physical body trying to expel an infection. By sealing and opening channels within itself, the beast corrals its invaders where it wills. Those who escape entrapment and crushing when the walls of arterial passageways close in around them, they soon find corrosive ichor, digestive acid, choking gases, or vicious warrior organisms, flooding the fleshy chambers they occupy. Being swallowed by a Tyranid Bio-ship is one of the most terrifying experiences there could be for any living, conscious being. In this chapter, we are going to go through a short extract from The Last Hunt by Robbie McNiven, which follows the story of the White Scars in their defense against the Tyranids of HIVE Fleet Cicatrix. In this segment, one crew of human soldiers manning an Augur space station is swallowed whole by a giant Tyranid ship. This particular short story goes as follows. The Tyranid Bio-ship had filled the view screens. Even as the stunned crew watched, the monstrosity's great, hooked chitin beak split apart. The maw yawned wide, impossibly wide. Wide enough, Davrik was sure, to swallow one of Darkan's moons. Its shadow fell across the Augur station, blotting out the light of the stars. The structure around them seemed to shudder, as though its terror matched that of its crew. The view screen now showed nothing but static-wash darkness. It had swallowed them whole. Corday had slumped on the deck, shaking and weeping uncontrollably. Crassus was looking down into his lap, knuckles white where he gripped the arms of his chair. Ankam had finally stopped gibbering. "Serene," he managed to say, looking over at the Augur analyst. "Serene, there's something I need to tell you." She continued to stare at the now blank view screen. A sudden impact threw them all. Davrik found himself sprawling across the deck, almost on top of Corday. The station shook violently, tremors dislodging rune banks and audio systems, and sending Davrik's empty recaf tin bouncing across the deck. The alarms triggered again across the cramped station. Crassus, who alone had managed to stay in his seat, deactivated them without comment. The view screen had gone offline completely, showing nothing but gray static. They're going to board us?" Ankam stammered as they picked themselves up. Any response was lost in another jarring impact. The station's frame shrieked in protest at the stresses put upon it. With their systems scrambled and broken, it was impossible to tell exactly where they were, or what was happening outside. The station seemed to settle slightly. The sounds of tortured metal reduced to a low creak. They all scanned the ceiling, looking for any sign of a breach. "Do you hear that?" Serene said. It was the first time she'd spoken since seeing the bio-ship. They all listened, breath held, straining to hear over the groan of adamantium and Corde's muted sobs. Eventually, Daverick caught what Serene had detected. A faint scratching, scrabbling noise, as though someone, or something, was scraping across the outside of the hull. It mirrored the scratching, tormenting all of them from inside their own skulls. "They're on the hull," Daverick said. Before he could go on, a crash shattered the breathless quiet. The section directly above Crassus's chair, in the center of the station's cockpit, collapsed. With it came a flood of broiling green liquid that struck Crassus just as he looked up. If the old sense-room master managed to draw breath to scream, the bioacid flooded his mouth before he could make a sound. Daverick caught an impression of his death as he was lost entirely in the torrent. Organics consumed in a heartbeat. The rest of the crew recoiled, but too slowly. Serene, nearest to the center of the cockpit, was struck by the acidic spray. Her hands went up to her exposed face, and her screaming filled the claustrophobic space. "No!" Ankem wailed, lunging across his bench to catch the auger analyst as she collapsed. He managed to drag her hands away from her face, then recoiled. Her features had already been reduced to pockmarked bone, her eyeballs running like liquid from their sockets, tendons slipping away with her fingers. Still, she screamed. Ankem doubled over and was sick. Daverick, whose station was furthest from Crassus's chair, scrambled back on top of his bench as the flood of acid spread across the decking plates. Serene had collapsed into the rising swill. Ankem tried to push himself against his vox banks, but was sick again and collapsed. The bugs got to him before the acid. There were insects in the hissing, steaming slime. Writhing, sightless maggot things, with hard black shells. They swarmed from the discolored biomatter, the air full of the susurration of their passing as they swiftly covered the deck, and then the cogitator stations, workbenches and walls, riding the rising tide of acid. First hundreds, and then thousands of them reached Ankem, swarming over his boots and knees and up his arms where he was crouched against the Vox systems. He tried to scream, but he choked. His eyes rolled back into their sockets as the alien swarm began eating him. Face still streaked with tears, Corde leapt directly from his bench into the stream that had consumed Crassus and his command chair. He was gone in an instant, as the breach in the station hull was burned wider. As Ankem's remains collapsed into the bioorganics sloshing about the cockpit's deck, Daverick stood rooted to the top of his bench. He couldn't think, couldn't move. He was in the throes of panic. A part of him realized he should end it quickly like Corde, but another part was desperate for another way out. Any way out that avoided the nightmare bile that was burning away everything. It was digesting the whole station, even as the terror kept him in place. Grohl's binary chair collapsed, pitching the unresponsive tech adept into the effluvium. His red cloak billowed for a moment before he was lost, coming apart amidst the steaming clouds of liquefied organics. For a moment, Daverick was alone. For a single, ludicrous second, everything felt surreal, ridiculous, almost calm. It had to be a nightmare. None of this horror could possibly be real. Then his bench collapsed.
Oh! God, Emperor, no!
He screamed, trying to scramble back onto the plastile's disintegrating remains.
No! No! No!
The bioacid caught him, sloshing around his boots and his lower fatigues. His panicked wails quickly turned to screams as the material was eaten away, exposing the flesh that in turn began to slough off. Muscle and sinew became organic paste that revealed bone that gave way and splintered beneath its own acid-gnawed weight. Daverick disintegrated slowly on his knees, eaten up inch by inch by the bile and the sightless, burrowing things that swam in it. Eventually, the insects flooded his raw throat, choking and suffocating him as they ate him from the inside out. The acid took what remained, as another section of the hull caved to emit a fresh gout of vicious toxins. This scene describes the terror of the last moments the crew endured, at least briefly, after being swallowed whole by the gigantic bio-ship and then absorbed by the interiors of it. The crew and all the material would then be processed by the giant Xenos ship to be converted into new Tyranid bioorganisms to continue the process of endless corruption. In this next chapter, we delve into the tale of the Sobbing God, an Ark of Omen, under the command of the Nurgle-worshipping warlord, Scourge-master Olgata. This cursed vessel, originally part of Abaddon's Bale fleets, became the stage for a nightmarish clash between the Death Guard and the Tyranids when it crossed paths with a tendril of the Hive Fleet Kraken. It was during the early years of the Era Indomitus that Abaddon the Despoiler unleashed his Bale fleets. At the heart of each heretic warfleet sailed the titanic abomination known as an Ark of Omen. Macro-class warships converted from space hulks through demonic cyber-sorcery. One particular Ark, the Sobbing God, sailed under the command of Scourge-master Olgata. This renegade warlord was a champion amongst the ranks of the Cleaved, revolting post-human warriors whose souls were pledged to the plague god Nurgle and whose armor constantly leaked reeking, oily blood. It was as the Sobbing God Bale fleet pursued an infernal quest on the orders of the Despoiler that it dropped out of the warp and straight into the midst of a tendril of Hive Fleet Kraken. Bioships converge on the heretic vessels, with vast weapons spitting bone lances and gouts of acid. Even as its escort vessels were torn apart, the Sobbing God was boarded by multiple swarms. Olgata and his Cleaved waged a fighting retreat into the heart of his flagship, and were there besieged. The broods of Hive Fleet Kraken are cunning, and the depths of the Ark offered endless pipes, vents, and crawlways through which they could outflank the defense lines of the Scourged. In that desperate hour, as his forces looked sure to be overrun, Olgata struck a bargain with an ancient sentience that had languished within one of the Ark's constituent vessels before it had even joined with the Space Hulk. In an instant, the Ark of Omen, the Cleaved, and all those bioforms still aboard were snatched from real space by the entity's power The next report of their presence came from an entirely different sector of Imperial space. The Sobbing God was sighted attacking settled worlds in the Felgoth Nebula, yet now it was a vessel divided. Almost a third of the Ark of Omen seethed with extrusions of Tyranid Bio-architecture, while the rest of the immense warship was riddled with mutation and suppurating disease. The Sobbing God was now a ship at war with itself, yet wherever it went, it also vented both renegade and Tyranid forces onto the luckless worlds that fell beneath its deformed shadow. In this chapter, we will listen to an audio log from a veteran who once faced the nightmarish horror of a Tyranid boarding action. The chaos of space combat is familiar enough to those hardened by war, but nothing prepares a soldier for the way the Tyranids invade. Not just the ship, but the mind.
Battle is grim enough as it is. Seeing the blackness illuminated by 1,000,000 charges, salvos, and blasts, never quite sure whether they will strike you or simply streak off into the void beyond. You never really feel like you're aware of it all. Like an unseen volley could career into your hull at any second and send the ship rocking from stern to bow. But the Tyranids, they are something else. To see a soft, probing tongue pressing against the portholes, seeming so harmless, so ineffectual, lulling you into a feeling of safety before beaks, teeth, and claws shatter the illusion and your ship's hull alike. Hearing the explosions and commotion as another raft of assault boats slam into your hull, that's something you can prepare for. The thunder of impacts, the groan of the ship's structure, the desperate scramble to man your stations. We've stood for that 1,000 times. But nothing, no matter how many battlefields you've seen, can prepare you for what comes after. It's the sound. That scream. Not of men, but of the vessels themselves. The way they tear into the ship's structure like starving beasts, rending and gnashing, devouring the hull from the inside out. You don't see the enemy at first, you just hear it. A low, relentless screech that echoes through every bulkhead, growing louder, closer, until you realize they're inside. It's not like facing orcs, where you know you'll meet them eye to eye, or the cold precision of Tau fire. No. These things don't fight. They consume. I've heard the way the walls scream as they're torn apart, felt the deck plates shake beneath my feet as something crawls up through the vents, something that shouldn't be. And when you finally catch sight of them, you're already too late. You see a fellow brother, a man who stood shoulder to shoulder with you in a dozen battles, stripped of his armor like a carcass at butcher's stall, dragged into the dark. I fought them once, just once, and it was enough. It doesn't matter how strong your armor is, how fast your reflexes are. Against them, you don't fight. Or at least you fight for a little while. But then you just hope you die before they reach you. I lost brothers that day. I somewhat lost myself. And as I stand here now recounting this to you, I can still hear that scream echoing in my mind. The sound of something that's not meant to exist, devouring all it touches. I have experienced it once, and I haven't enough limbs spare to survive it a second time.
The Tyranid Bio-ships are more than just war machines. They are predatory ecosystems, designed to dismantle entire fleets and devour worlds. For the warriors of the Imperium, to face them is to confront the very essence of death itself. In your case, how would you survive inside the belly of a Tyranid Bio-ship? Could any force in the galaxy truly stand against the overwhelming might of the Tyranid hive fleets? Or is the Imperium doomed to be swallowed whole by these relentless invaders? We'd like to take a moment to sincerely thank our incredible supporters for making this episode possible. Your contributions have enabled us to commission some of the artworks you've seen today, bringing the grim darkness of the far future to life in a way that words alone can't capture. And I'm adding this myself into the script. Your contributions, they also go toward paying us voice actors, like myself and Fantasy Bound, or you know him as Dr. Stefan Hoffman, as well as the colorful cast of supporting voices you often hear in all of our videos. So this is a personal thank you from me, Scrub, to you. Thank you. If you enjoyed this lore dive into the terrifying depths of the Tyranid Bio-ships, and you'd like to see more exclusive content, consider supporting us on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Your support not only helps us continue to produce high-quality videos, but also grants you access to behind-the-scenes content, early releases, our Discord server, and other extra perks. The Tyranids are arguably the greatest threat to the Imperium and the galaxy as a whole. You can learn more about this Xenos threat in our full lore overview video on the Tyranids. You can also learn more about the ongoing 4th Tyrannic War that is currently raging across the galaxy and has already claimed billions of lives. We thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next lore exploration.